Okay, so now I will look at the typical mistakes that black can make in the d42 opening, which can arise from different transpositions, but it eventually leads to the position with the isolated pawn that white has on d4. And in this particular game that I played, we arrived at this position through the Caro-Kann variation, the pawn of bottom attack. This is really the starting position of this variation, and I will just go through all the games that I played where black made a bad blunder, and I will just try to see what is the most typical mistake that black commits. So in this game, black played b6, and this seems like a logical move when you think about it, because the problem that black has in this position is that while everything is very solid, he has some troubles getting the bishop from c8 out, and because the pawn on e6 is not going to move forward, black has to look for other ways to let the bishop come out, and b6 is the obvious way, because if he could only put the bishop on on b7, that would be a good location for that piece. Unfortunately, for the moment, that leaves the knight on c6 unprotected, and white can take an advantage of that. And the way to do this is to capture on d5. And now black has a choice to capture with the queen or to capture with the pawn. And either way, he is in a difficult situation. So in this game, he captured with a pawn, and that still leaves the knight unprotected. So now white can play queen c2, attacking both on h7 and on c6. And in this game, black chose to protect on h7, and after queen c6, white is just up a piece. So the game continued a bit longer, but that's pretty much the end of this game. The result became clear right there. So let's now look at the next game. Here, the position where the mistake was made is a little bit different. From the starting variation, black first played a6, and then white played a3, trying to cover up the b4 square. And here black played b5, with the same goal of getting the bishop to come out to b7. But then again, the knight capturing on d5 and queen c2 is threatened, and c6 is hanging. Here black recaptured with the queen, but and that protects the knight on c6, but then the queen itself is in a dangerous position. So with bishop e4, white exploits that. Here the queen retreated to d7, but that just allows white to attack the queen again, and exploiting the pin as well along the long diagonal. Black captured on e5, but then white just won the rook, and he's up the exchange in a great position. So this game was decided here as well. Next game. In a slightly different position in the same opening, black plays b6. The knight has not come out to c6 yet, so it seems like it should be a little bit more safe to do this now. But the weakness of the b6 square is still going to be a factor. So white captures on d5 again, queen captures. It would be possible for black to capture with a pawn, but then he would not have the pressure anymore against d4, and after something like knight e5, he would also have troubles developing the b8 knight. So black wanted to be a bit more ambitious, and he played queen d5, hoping to later still build up the pressure against the white isolated pawn. Maybe rook d8, knight c6, bishop f6. But for the moment there's still a problem, because his queen is too vulnerable, and after rook e1 the same problems as we saw before still arise. Now bishop e4 is threatened, and because the rook is badly placed on a8, this is a very dangerous threat. So black couldn't find anything better than knight c6, trying to get the knight out and block the diagonal. And after bishop e4, it's still a very bad position. So here white played queen c2, again hitting h7 and c6, and again white's winning material. So next game, I have to save this here. And here a similar position. Black plays b5. Here he recaptures with the queen. Here he plays it a little bit better. He puts the queen on d6 instead of d7. But then after queen c2, it's still the same set of threats against c6 and again and h7, even though knight e5 isn't possible anymore. And now that white has won this pawn, his position is very good, not just because he won the pawn, but also because the black king is very vulnerable, and should some piece come to the h-file, there would be a problem, a big problem in fact, because now there's nothing covering the black king. So rook c8, queen d3, activating the queen, bishop f6, trying to put some pressure on d4, knight e5. Now the third rank has opened up for the queen, and now if black was to capture on e5, queen h3, king g8, queen h7 would be a very quick end to this game. So g6 is necessary to give an escape square for the king, queen h3 anyway, and after king g7 the attack just continues, and after queen h6, king g8, knight g6, white is able to sacrifice the piece without any risk. Now the attack is very strong. Now the black king is completely exposed and pushed toward the center of the board. Now bishop g5 is the threat, so trying to give the king an escape square with e5, queen g5. Now opening up the position even further by sacrificing the pawn. 5, bishop e4. Now black is trying to create counterplay by attacking f2. So if I was to now capture on g7, that would be a big mistake, because then I would get mated. So instead I first give an intermediate check. Bishop g6, and now the king gets mated after queen e6, king queen h3 and queen h7 mate. So through winning the h7 pawn, white got a very big advantage out of the opening, because he was able to later use that missing pawn to create a strong attack against the black king. Okay, and here's another game, and the position is slightly different, but again black makes the mistake of trying to get the bishop out too early with b6, and after queen e4 a trivial fork with the threat against the piece and against h7, and black resigned right away. And now we're back to the very first game in our list. So we went through the 5 games, played over different years, and looked for black's mistakes in this opening with the isolated queen pawn, and they all really point to the same problem: playing b6 too early and trying to get the bishop out from c8. So this is a serious problem that black has to solve. So in the next few games, in the next video, we'll look at what happens if black tries to solve the problem in a better way, and tries to not move the bishop too soon and instead prepare it. So we'll look at that in the next video.